Hey y'all, today's lesson is going to be wall framing part two. Now, in the previous lesson, it was basics of wall framing. You'll understand the names, the locations, a little bit about crowning, turning studs in the proper direction. What we're going to go through today is actually laying out the entire house as far as studs, headers, and all the other components that go into a typical wall. So once again, I've gone through and put this slide in here for you so you can identify the names of all the components we're going to be working on. Today we are going to get very specific in terms of laying out our top plate, our bottom plate, our king studs, our cripples, our headers, as well as our trimmers. So I'm going to tell you about how you locate all these components in a wall and put them in the proper location. So in order to get them in the proper location, we have to refer to our plans. Once again, always refer to your plans for placement and location of all your walls and any other components that are going to be going into your house. So let me talk you through this first, and then I'll give you a visual of what I'm talking about. So we are going to do top plates, bottom plates, wall studs, headers, everything that goes into a wall. We always refer to our plans for the location specifically of our openings, doors, and windows. So believe it or not, what we're going to do is cut our top and bottom plate first. We are then going to locate all our doors and windows, and we're going to basically transfer those dimensions, those measurements, onto our top and bottom plate so we can insert all our wall studs. Let's see what I'm talking about. So we cut top and bottom plates. From previous lesson, you know these need to be nice and straight. If you're going to be doing exterior walls, this is going to be 2x6. If you're doing interior walls, it's going to be 2x4s. Once again, so important to refer back to your plans. So we cut our top and bottom plate the same length. This is super important because what it does, it allows accuracy when we're laying out. And when I say layout, that means inserting all our components, wall studs, headers, everything. So cut them the same length because we are going to transfer the lines on both of these. Next thing we do, we stand them up on edge down here. I stand them both up on edge. That allows me now to accurately transfer all the measurements on them. So we are going to take these and start figuring out where everything goes. Lucky for us, there are no doors and windows in here. That would be the first step, laying them out. Instead, what we are going to do is move on to a very basic wall. In other words, no openings in it. It's going to be easier to lay the entire thing out with no doors and windows. So what I'm going to do is kind of move you guys right to step 3. I'm going to cover doors and windows in the next lesson. So what we do, we take our top plate and we hook our tape at the very end of it, okay? This is where we're going to start our measurements from, the end, because we're going to lay out all our wall studs, our king studs, at 16 inches on center. Now, I have 16 and 3/4, 32 and 3/4. The reason for that is that's where you're going to make your mark. If you look down here, I made my mark at 16 and 3/4. That's going to take us to the front of the stud because that will center up our stud at 16. I just want to throw this out there for you. Some people are going to lay out at 15 and a quarter and then put the stud in front of it. I am going to lay out at the front end of the stud and put the stud behind that 16 and 3/4 inch mark. That means the center of the stud will be at 16. The same holds true for anybody who lays out at 15 and a quarter. It's just the difference of laying out the 3/4 past the stud or 3/4 before the stud. So let's stick with what I'm showing you here. 16 and 3/4, that's going to be the front edge of the stud. Fantastic. Next thing we are going to do is mark them. Now remember, I had you make that mark at the front edge of the stud, so it's super important we put an X to indicate where the main part of the stud is. So I have an X, and that's carrying the main part, because remember, this line right here is 16 and 3/4. That means here is going to be 16. If you look at the tape measure down here, you're going to see, after I put my studs in place, it is 16, 32. That's 16 inches on center. So by placing the front edge of your stud at that mark that we made, and I make what's called a caret, it's a little triangular mark which really indicates very accurately where the front point of my stud is. I kept my plates together, made the lines, put my X's where the bulk of the stud is going to go. Now, this helps you accurately lay out the walls. This is why we put the studs together, top and bottom plate, because we're going to split them apart. And when we split them apart, we're going to infill with our king studs. This will assure great accuracy. Do not flip your plates around. Super important. Just take them and spread them out. What am I talking about? Here's your top plate. Here's your bottom plate. I took them and I just spread them out and I filled in with my king studs. Now, when we fill in with our king studs like this, yours are going to be 8 feet long. You got to make sure. Remember, we talked just a little bit about crown before, but crown is the bow in the wood. You want to make sure it's facing up. Long story short, all the crowns need to be facing the same way, or like I told you before, the walls will get really wavy and then we get problems. So from this point, we're going to stand it up. We're going to make sure our walls are nice and square. Pull in squares again. Your instructors are going to tell you all about how to square up a wall. We can pull diagonals. We can come in and do all kinds of different scenarios with Pythagorean theorem to make sure these walls are square. But before you assemble them, you do want to make sure they're square. You also want to come down and make sure all your studs are on layout, 16 inches on center. So in other words, here we are at 48 inches. It's perfectly on layout. The center of the stud has to be at 48 inches. Remember, those red marks are going to be our layout marks. And those layout marks are 16, 32, 48, so on and so forth. So that is basically how we assemble a wall. We are going to move into framing part 3, and I am going to go through headers, which create door openings, and you're going to use the principles that you learned here to complete those walls. So that concludes our lesson on framing. Bye-bye.